So this is part two of the lecture, Miss Dalloway, for There She Was, simply because my QuickTime shut down mid-sentence. So I'll pick up where I left off. I was talking about how Clarissa is more susceptible to these moments of being because of her openness to the flux of time. She's not as evaluative as many other characters in the novel. Septimus, of course, shares this with her. And we see early in the novel um, how a moment of being might actually feel. She talks about being charmed by women and how women give her a rush that men don't. And she likely has in mind that moment in Burton when Sally Seaton kissed her. And we learn this that when she feels the charm of a woman, it's only for a moment, but it was enough. It was a sudden revelation, a tinge like a blush, which one tried to check. And then, as it spread, one yielded to its expansion and rushed to the farthest verge, and there quivered and felt the world come closer, swollen with some astonishing significance, some pressure of rapture, which split its thin skin and gushed and poured with an extraordinary alleviation over the cracks and sores. Then, for a moment, she had seen an illumination, a match burning in a crocus, an inner meaning almost expressed. But the close withdrew, the heart softened. It was over. The moment. These are the moments that give life significance. And not only does Clarissa experience them, she also tries to create them. That's really what a party is about. You could say it's an effort to create an aesthetic space where moments of being are more likely to happen. So this takes us to the end of the novel, the very end, where we see Clarissa and Peter and Sally, old friends, reunited after many, many years. And Peter, at this moment, I would suggest, has a moment of being. He Clarissa says he's someone who has to go into everything. He's overthinking things constantly. But here's a moment where all that is shut down, and he sees Clarissa and has a moment of being. Here's how the language goes. Um, I will come. I will follow you into the other room, Sally Seaton. I will come, said Peter. But he sat for a moment. What is this terror? What is this ecstasy? He thought to himself. What is it that fills me with extraordinary excitement? It is Clarissa, he said, for there she was. It's simply her presence there. It's not that she means anything. She's there. And notice that Peter has ambiguous feelings. It's a terror, it's an ecstasy. Uh, what is the terror? What is the ecstasy? It's as if he's overwhelmed with such intense and contradictory feelings that gives him an extreme pleasure. It is a moment of being. And what is it? It's simply Clarissa as she is. For the first time in the novel, he's not evaluating her, he's not criticizing her. He simply sees her as she is, as a hostess, dressed in green at her party. And he sees her power as an artist, to create these situations where moments of being are more likely to occur. So it's interesting that throughout the novel we've seen Septimus is very open to the present moment, the isness of life without imposing the ought, and we see that certainly with Clarissa. And here Peter, who certainly is not nearly as overweening in his abstract thinking as a Holmes or a Bradshaw, but this is definitely a man who thinks a lot. One might say thinks too much. He's kind of neurotic, we might say. He's very insecure. But this is a moment where all that is shut down for him, and he can just experience the isness of Clarissa in all of her splendor. So the novel ends appropriately, we might say. Very much going to the end of the novel, Clarissa's thinking a lot about death. She hears about Septimus, and she thinks about how he undertook his death as suicide was as it should have been because he was able to express his singularity and he didn't let the Bradshaws of the world take him over. And she herself knows that she's growing old and her friends are growing old, but there's a vivacity to her. She says, I will assemble, I will still create my party. And that is what she does. So out of the death and the tragedy and the transience that pervades so much of this novel, Wolfe initially wanted to call it the hours. It's very much about the passage of time. It's about things decaying, falling into ruination. It ends with Clarissa creating this party that stands almost as a beautiful work of art, in which someone like Peter can have a moment of being. So we see Clarissa at the very end through his eyes, but through his eyes, one might say at this point, unclouded by his uh, insecurities, neuroses, propensity to criticize.